alerted if anything else is to occur. Thank you.
What time should we expect another briefing?
Well, there you hear the comments from two officials. I have to be perfectly honest, not sure who they are, whether they work for American Airlines or they work for the airport in Dallas, but they were in Dallas today, and they say at the end of that news conference there is no specific threat to that airport, which will be reassuring to people who are around the airport, but anybody who's wanting to fly anywhere in the country at the moment is unable to do so anyway. But the conditions in the country are of such a confusing nature at the moment that stuff just comes in all the time. We've had authorities in Lexington, Kentucky, tell our affiliate there, WTVQ, just a short while ago, that a plane is missing from radar in their airspace. And it is simply going to take time in order to sort out whether or not we're looking or at an operation or somehow witnessing or being on the edges of an operation that is continuing to unfold in various parts of the country. We still indeed have a missing aircraft or a missing or not accounted for aircraft from United Airlines. We had a crash near Pittsburgh here today, about which we have only that knowledge, no understanding whatsoever whether or not it is relevant to the others. We do know that the president and the vice president, and interestingly enough, former presidents, are all now in secure locations. That's Pierre Thomas, our Justice Department reporter, connecting into his sources there to tell us all that. ABC's John McKenzie, who's out on the streets of New York, has spoken to the New York City Fire Department officials, and they report many missing firemen, perhaps as many as 200. And John Miller, been such assistance here this morning that will come as no surprise to you because you worked these streets for so long, both before you went back to being a reporter as an official with the government and with the police department.
That's right.
And the fire department stays there. I've seen the fire department all my professional life stay there till the bitter end.
Well, you know, they are the people who are always running in when everybody else is running out, and in this case would have been the front line of the evacuating force for the World Trade Center. The fire department has a set plan for a disaster at the World Trade Center. It's an automatic second alarm, which brings more than 175 firefighters. This, of course, brought hundreds more, and their job is to go through the building and bring those people out. And there's really no telling at what stage of the evacuation they were at or how many of them were still inside when the first building collapsed or the second building collapsed.
I remember 30 some odd years ago, first coming to New York, and there was a building that collapsed, and the firefighters were ultimately the ones to die on almost the very first night I was here at ABC all those years ago. As you say, everybody's going one way and they're going the other way. John, I know that you're listening a lot to the network. By this I mean the police network, and one assumes we're not interrupting and intruding on them. I think that's pretty certain. Give us the general tenor of things at the moment.
Right now, it's a situation that's vastly calmed down. As you hear the operations, which I've been monitoring since the beginning, their voices are now level. This is much more about organizing an incredible crime scene second, but first, organizing a massive transport of casualties. They literally have passenger ferry boats, police launches, and other vessels standing by to ferry people away to outer boroughs, helicopters to do the same thing. It's really a tremendous effort to triage the people who are injured, to decide who's viable, who can be saved, who needs immediate attention, who can wait, to categorize them and tag them as such, and then to designate whether they can stand a long ride or just a short ride to the nearest available medical help. That's what's going on, and that's an incredibly large effort. On the other side, there's the investigation, which is unfolding, processing probably the largest crime scene in U.S. history, certainly larger than the Oklahoma City bombing or even the first World Trade Center bombing, or in this case, because of the size of those two buildings, the twin embassy bombings in East Africa.
Yeah, and that's the Pentagon we're looking at this morning. And I'm sorry, but we have more bad news. Lisa Stark, who covers aviation from us, reports in from Seattle that 2 United flights have now crashed. Now, just so we don't lose track of the numbers, we told you the United Flight 93 going from New York to San Francisco crashed outside Pittsburgh today. We believe now, according to our aviation sources, the United Flight 175, which was a 767 destined to go from Boston to Los Angeles, has crashed, and we do not know where. So we have 4 major commercial aircraft which have been involved in either accidents or violence today. We have the 2 at the trade towers in New York City. We're not certain, but we believe both those are somehow connected to American Airlines, but we're not sure of that, absolutely sure. And that news conference in Dallas a few minutes ago didn't shed much light on the subject. And we have 2 United Airlines flights involved in crashes. We do not know the circumstances of those crashes. One of them flying from New York, just outside New York, to San Francisco, and the other flying from Boston to Los Angeles. And we may or may not have another aircraft because we have no certainty yet what the aircraft was, who it belonged to, really what size it was, that penetrated the outer ring of the Pentagon this morning, right through to the inner ring of the Pentagon's courtyard there, and caused what ABC's Jack McQuethy called heavy casualties there. So we have 4 significant commercial aircraft carrying, in some cases, well more than 100 passengers who've all been involved in acts of violence on purpose or otherwise today. And Mayor Giuliani, Mayor of New York, who will probably get a better feel of this before anybody else at the moment, has now described a tremendous number of lives lost in the New York attack on the New York trade towers, and it doesn't come as any great surprise to anybody. The mayor begins to give us some sense of magnitude which is beyond that which we are merely speculating and or talking about, even though we know that many, 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 many lives have been lost. And ABC's John McKenzie, who's just a couple of blocks away from the World Trade Center at a makeshift fire command center. Look at that again. I mean, it is stunning. John McQuethy at that makeshift fire command center has had a battalion commander tell him that as many as 200 firefighters are principally unaccounted for. So it is no wonder that all across the country today, at airports and at public sites, many, many which have been closed from the west all the way across to the east, people are holding their breath. Don't wish to be melodramatic about it, are holding their breath as to whether or not there is one more, or should I say, another incident to come. And that was because the shock was so profound watching on television, as we did this morning, to see the second aircraft come in and crash into the other of the twin trade towers. There it is, which have now both collapsed. And it is, in some ways, a reminder of what happened when the Challenger exploded, and the constant repetition of the explosion of the Challenger on Challenger space shuttle just drove it into our collective consciousness all across the nation. What we had witnessed together, though were clearly unable to feel in the same way as those people in the immediate area. I just want to pick up some other reaction coming from around the country and around the world. It's very interesting, the reaction we've had immediately, officially, from the highest ranks of the Palestinian Authority and from Afghanistan. I think we can hear Chairman Arafat, Yasser Arafat, in just a moment, but the Taliban ambassador to Pakistan, it is in Afghanistan where the United States believes Osama bin Laden has been most carefully given sanctuary, if not protected by the Taliban. But the Taliban ambassador to Pakistan has condemned what he called terrorist attacks on the United States on Tuesday. He said in a dispatch from Reuters out of Islamabad in Pakistan, this is a terrorism act and we strongly condemn it. And then from Kabul itself, the capital of Afghanistan, a spokesman for the rulers there said that the Saudi dissident, Osama bin Laden is a Saudi Arabian citizen, could not be responsible for a spate of terror attacks in the United States. I don't understand that particularly, but here's the quote from him. It says, what happened in the United States was not a job of ordinary people. It could have been the work of governments. Osama bin Laden cannot do this work, neither us, said the Taliban spokesman to the Reuters news agency in Kandahar, which is a city in the southern part of of Afghanistan. This could have been the act of either internal enemies of the United States or its major rivals. Now, there are a couple of things. John Miller talked to me about this because you've been to Afghanistan. You went to see Osama bin Laden. In every organization, anywhere in the world where governments or organizations have been somehow connected to terrorism, in the United States' mind, real or not, people are just waiting. There's going to be some kind of response to this. When Osama bin Laden blew up those embassies, I guess it was before you went into Afghanistan, they attacked his camps. They didn't get him.
They sent 75 cruise missiles at $1 million apiece into his camps based on intelligence that he would be meeting there with his leadership.
Disneyland, California Adventure, Knott's Berry Farm, Six Flags, and Magic Mountain. Also, we do have a little bit of good news for you, and that is, we told you earlier that there were a number of flights still up in the air and that they are trying to get them down. Now, all planes have been accounted for. The FAA has confirmed this, that all planes have been accounted for, so that is some good news. Okay, and let me also let you know about some financial information. Word from Jim Newman at the ABC Business Desk is the U.S. dollar is plunging due to this disaster. That's the U.S. dollar on the foreign market is plunging. Oil prices are soaring right now. Police Chief Bernard Parks, he talked to the media just a little while ago, and he said that anti-terrorist division, his anti-terrorist division, they're being deployed to look at local places that could be potential targets of terrorism. They're making sure that they cover all their bases, making sure everything is safe for you. And I also want to clarify that I said LAUSD schools are on schedule, which is true. I also mentioned La Cañada School is canceled. High school has been canceled. That is not in the LAUSD school district, La Cañada, but we want to reiterate that La Cañada High School has been shut down because of its close proximity to JPL. Is that correct? Hang on. We don't know. Okay. And also I'm being told that the Latin Grammys are at the Forum, not at Staples. I think I've gone over, let me check my notes real quickly. If you are looking for a loved one who is flying in on any kind of a domestic flight, domestic flights that are coming into this area were rerouted to Ontario International Airport. That's in the Inland Empire. Ontario International Airport. All domestic flights were rerouted to that airport. If you have a loved one on a flight that's coming in, more than likely that person is there. If he or she was on an international flight, we have to tell you that all international flights were diverted to Canada or Mexico. So that's the information when it comes to your flights. We're going to keep monitoring the situation when it comes to specific information about the Los Angeles, Southern California area. We're going to bring it to you just as soon as we can. In the meantime, we're going to throw it back to the network and keep it right here on ABC7.
I mean, the unspeakable, the collapsing of the Twin Towers, one after another, that while there was a high pitch to a lot of the voices and a little screaming and yelling, the rapidity with which calm was restored on the radio, and they went back to sending orders and continuing operations and acting in a logical manner, you really do revert to your training as a second nature.
As you look at this and you listen to John Miller, and I thank you, John, for that. No one is better plugged into the police and firefighting apparatus in New York City than John Miller. He not only been a reporter for most of his adult life, but he worked for the police department in New York for a while before he had the good sense to come back to journalism, and he is totally plugged in. But even, and when he talks about soft numbers here, it's because as you look at this disaster scene, and that's a live picture. That is a live picture 9, 10, 11, 12, 1, 2, 4.5 hours after this actually occurred, and you're looking at the smoke and the dust still emerging from the edges of these canyons in lower Manhattan, and the magnitude of trying to deal with these people, extends to moving them across the Hudson River in ferry boats, the ubiquitous ferry boat in New York harbors, not as necessary as they were in the days of greater ship travel, to the New Jersey side. And the Canadian television network, our partner, one of our partner television networks in Canada, is now reporting that American burn victims from here, I'm not sure whether it's the Pentagon or here, but I suspect it's from here, are being transported as far away as Canada to Canadian hospitals there. And there you get some sense of how difficult it is to get a real grasp of how enormous this is, other than to say, as the mayor of New York and the governor of New York State both said to us a short while ago, I just don't want to touch the casualty figures as of now. Pierre Thomas, who's been with us for much of the morning, also reports from the FBI And we may never know much more about one of the aircraft than this, that at least one of the planes this morning, we haven't got no more details on that, was able to communicate that it had been hijacked. In some cockpits, in some of the aircraft now being used in commercial service, there's a button you can hit that sends a code to your headquarters that says you've been hijacked, so you don't have to try to tell the hijacker that you're actually talking to headquarters. But that's as much as we know about one of the several aircraft today which were involved in attacks on the United States. Now, Diane Sawyer at Times Square has been trying, I know as best she can, to get some handle on casualties vis-a-vis the people who are pouring into hospitals. Diane?
Right, Peter. Here's all I know, and it's kind of postscript to what John Miller was saying earlier. With Beekman Hospital, the closest hospital, as he said, has been relatively out of commission. But St. Vincent's Hospital, which is one of those in the next perimeter, 25 major hospitals in New York, this is one of the next closest, told us just minutes ago they had 184 hospitalized, 2 dead. Now, again, we know that these figures are going to be changing almost minute by minute, so this is very early. But at this time, and by now we're talking just minutes ago, 184 hospitalized, 2 dead. They said to us again, though, remember that where the World Trade Centers used to be, there is now a mountain of rubble. We are talking 200,000 tons of steel, 425,000 cubic yards of concrete, and 43,600 windows with all the glass in them now just lying on the ground. So the excavation has only begun, but 184 right now from St. Vincent's.
Thanks, Diane, very much. And I must tell you, I feel a little embarrassed about trying to focus on casualties in numerical terms, only because it will ultimately give us some sense of the magnitude of this attack on top of the buildings themselves being brought to the ground, and similarly true at the Pentagon. So nobody feels gruesome, or it's not about the gruesomeness of the casualty figures. It is simply trying to get some sense of the magnitude in human terms rather than the physical terms, which so much of us in the country saw just before our eyes. Before I talked to John and to Diane, I was just running there briefly through various different parts of the country where the ripple effect of these attacks were felt. In Las Vegas, for example, this is back to the Associated Press report, which they did a really good job pulling the country together. Security was increased at all of casinos on the Strip in Las Vegas, because if you think about it, for the enemies of the United States, that kind of excess is seen as a symbol of the United States as well. The only place we could find all of the federal buildings open so far was in Vermont, where the federal buildings in Montpelier and Burlington were both open. And, you know, they have an atomic energy plant up there, and it was placed on a state of heightened security as well. Whereas in Nebraska, you'll see the first of probably many examples of this in the hours and days ahead. State employees were asked if they would give blood, because blood will be needed. There is a blood shortage in the United States, as we've heard time and again from the Red Cross. It's almost at a state of crisis in terms of blood collection in the United States at the moment. And so and what do you need in a time like this? You need blood, and you need plasma for all the people who have been hurt and damaged. And so that's important. And in Nebraska, state employees were responding to requests for blood donations, and at the Air Force bases out there, and then the security was heightened. And at churches all over the country, they're beginning to have these services, which will become part of the national fabric in the next couple of days, as people pray for the victims and those we hope are survivors of this. Terry Moran is at the White House, which is his normal beat. He didn't go with the president to Florida today. It's often the case that the president's doing a purely political trip. We ask him to stay home to give us a broader sense of things. Well, Terry, what's the state of the White House as of now?
Well, Peter, the White House has pretty much been evacuated altogether. Just before it was evacuated, we are told that the national security team was taken to the secure situation room in there, but they are the only people in there. White House staff, most of the White House staff was told to go home. And the president, as you've heard, flew to Louisiana and is now en route, we don't know where. As he said, he is trying to make sure that the country knows that the government is still running. We've seen around town motorcades assembling outside the various cabinet departments, and we've just seen recently some traffic into the White House. So there is some government activity, but without the president at the moment.
Terry, there's a very small collection of reporters and camera team on board the President and Air Force One at the moment. I think the only reporter on board is Ann Compton, am I correct? Or certainly the only television reporter on board?
Well, actually, Ann is in the radio seat today. The pool, as it's called, is flying with the president. Today, CBS News is the pool. It alternates every day.
Right.
This pool will travel with him wherever he goes, and he made that statement that we saw earlier to the pool. The rest of the press who was accompanying the president to Florida, we are told, is now on a bus because of the air traffic shutdown from Florida back to Washington.
Terry, I wondered if, from your perspective of our White House correspondent, whether you agree with me and certainly our political director, I think, who says that how the president now spends his time today, what he is seen to do, is absolutely vital, not just to the country, but to him.
Well, it's critical time for him. He said that the nation is being tested. The new president is being tested as well. But he has other restrictions on what he can do. That political mission he has to reassure the country and to show that he is leading it is actually secondary or even tertiary. The first thing is he has to keep himself safe. The Secret Service is going to insist that he be secured, and then second, he must remain in efficient strategic communication with United States forces around the world. That's undoubtedly why they took him to Barksdale Air Force Base in Shreveport. But you're absolutely right. The main thing he has to do for most Americans is communicate to them that he's in charge, that he intends to take control of this situation, and as he said, hunt down the people who are responsible for it and punish them.
Terry, I know you want to go back to your reporting. Is there anything else you want to add at the moment?
Well, Peter, it's just that this whole complex, which is usually abuzz with activity, which is really an office for hundreds of people, is now silent for the most part, and an armed camp. And that is a very striking thing for all of us who go to work there every day.
And what I notice is you're to the south of the South Lawn. You're on the southern side of the White House. We very often see you broadcasting from the other side of the White House. Why are you way down where you are?
Well, we've been cleared out of the North Lawn, which is where we normally broadcast from, and we are now, as you can see, south of the south ellipse of the White House. I can tell you that the evacuation of the White House itself, which has happened before with bomb threats and suspicious cars and packages, today did not proceed as orderly as it has. I was told by one of the White House staffers that their security official came in and said everybody should leave in an orderly fashion, and about a minute later an agent ran in and said, just run, get out.
Okay, thanks very much, Terry. We'll come back to you, but you get some sense from Terry Moran standing there, locked dramatically out of the area with which he is so familiar. We saw some pictures earlier today. I'm here we get them up again for people who have just joined us, of people leaving the White House early on. First, the White House police.
Our Department Operations Center and the County Emergency Operations Center is now activated, and it will remain activated until